There are wounds that never bleed. No broken bones, no bruises, just a single sentence spoken in front of the right people. And suddenly, 20 years of love becomes nothing more than a joke. Emily Carter didn't cry the night her husband introduced her as his maid. She smiled. She shook the hands of the people who had just laughed at her. She quietly placed the gift she had spent 3 months saving for on a nearby table and walked out of the most expensive hospital in Chicago without looking back. No one in that ballroom noticed they had just witnessed the exact moment a marriage died. And no one, not even her husband, had any idea that within 6 months, the woman he was ashamed to call his wife would become the reason his entire world came crashing down. But to understand how one sentence destroyed everything, you have to go back 20 years. Chicago wasn't always home to Emily Carter. She grew up in a small farming town outside Springfield, Illinois, where everybody knew everybody, and dreams usually stopped at the county line. Her father repaired tractors. Her mother worked as a school secretary. Money wasn't just tight, it barely existed. Emily learned early that if she wanted something, she'd have to earn it herself. By 16, she was babysitting after school. By 18, she was waiting tables every weekend. She graduated near the top of her high school class with a scholarship to the University of Illinois, where she planned to study business administration. She loved numbers. Budgets made sense to her. People didn't. During her sophomore year, she met Daniel Brooks. He was handsome without trying, the kind of man who remembered everyone's birthday, held doors open for strangers, and stayed after biology lab to help classmates understand anatomy. He wanted one thing more than anything else in the world: to become a surgeon. His father had died waiting for heart surgery because the nearest specialist was nearly 3 hours away. Daniel never forgot sitting in that emergency room as a frightened 16-year-old, watching doctors apologize for something they couldn't control. That night, he promised himself that one day, no family would lose someone because there weren't enough surgeons. Emily fell in love with that promise long before she fell in love with Daniel. He wasn't chasing money. He wasn't chasing prestige. He wanted to save lives. Or at least, that's what she believed. They married 3 years later in a little white church surrounded by cornfields. The reception was held in the church fellowship hall. Emily's mother baked the wedding cake herself. Daniel borrowed his brother's suit because he couldn't afford a tuxedo. Their honeymoon lasted exactly 2 days. On the drive back to Chicago, they stopped for gas. Daniel stared at the receipt. "We're down to $93. Emily smiled. "We're richer than yesterday." He laughed. "You married an optimist." "No," she replied, squeezing his hand. "You married someone who believes in you." Those words would shape the next 12 years of her life. Medical school wasn't expensive, it was crushing. Tuition, books, lab fees, housing, exam costs, clinical rotations. Every semester seemed to invent a new way to empty their bank account. Daniel's schedule left little room for work. Emily insisted that wasn't his problem. "I'll handle the bills," she told him. "You handle becoming the doctor you promised the world." She meant every word. Within 6 months, she had taken a second job. She worked mornings as an office receptionist for a logistics company. Evenings, she waited tables at an Italian restaurant downtown. 3 nights a week, she cleaned office buildings after midnight. Some mornings, she slept less than 3 hours before starting again. Daniel protested at first.
Keep doing this. You're gonna burn
"You
yourself
can't keep doing
out."
this."
I promise
She
I'll
kissed
keep
him on
going
the
until you
forehead.
graduate.
"I can't. You'll
We're
burn
almost
yourself
there.
out. Not before you graduate." Every paycheck disappeared before she even held it. Rent, electricity, internet, insurance, groceries, tuition payments, student loans that somehow never became smaller. She quietly sold her grandmother's engagement ring to pay for Daniel's surgical instruments during her 3rd year. She never told him. When he asked where the ring was, she smiled. "I keep it somewhere safe." That wasn't exactly a lie. It had become the future she was buying for the man she loved. Years passed. Daniel graduated at the top of his class. Emily stood in the audience wearing the same blue dress she'd owned for 6 years because there wasn't money for another one. When they called his name, she stood before anyone else. She clapped until her hands hurt. Daniel found her afterward and wrapped her in his arms. "I couldn't have done this without you." Emily buried her face against his shoulder. "I know." Those 4 words were the happiest she'd ever spoken. For a while, they were also true. Residency came next. Longer hours, more pressure, more responsibility. But something else arrived too. Recognition. Doctors started remembering Daniel's name. Medical journals began publishing his research. Hospital administrators invited him to private dinners. Pharmaceutical companies sponsored conferences where ambitious young surgeons rubbed shoulders with wealthy investors and influential hospital executives. Emily noticed the changes long before Daniel did. His suits became more expensive. His conversations became shorter. He started correcting the way she spoke. "It's pronounced cardiovascular," he would say with an embarrassed smile whenever she stumbled over medical terminology. He began introducing colleagues by their titles. "This is Dr. Harrison, Dr. Patel, Chief Reynolds." Emily was simply, "This is Emily." Not "my wife," just Emily. At first, she convinced herself he was exhausted. Then she blamed the pressure. Then she blamed herself. Maybe she wasn't polished enough. Maybe she should have finished college. Maybe she should have learned more about medicine so she could hold conversations with his colleagues. So she bought books, watched lectures online, read medical journals after finishing 12-hour days. She wanted to understand his world. She didn't realize Daniel had already decided she no longer belonged in it.
She bought extra copies and stored them neatly in a plastic container in the hallway closet. Whenever Daniel left for work before sunrise, she'd whisper the same words to herself. "He's living the dream we built together." She never noticed she'd stopped saying "our dream." It had quietly become his. Daniel's world grew bigger. Emily's grew smaller. She finally quit cleaning office buildings after Daniel became an attending surgeon. For the first time in nearly 12 years, she could sleep through the night. But she didn't stop working. She accepted a full-time position in patient services at St. Matthew Medical Center. It wasn't glamorous. She welcomed nervous families, delivered paperwork, escorted elderly patients to appointments, helped people who couldn't understand insurance forms, sat beside frightened spouses while their loved ones were in surgery. Most people forgot her name 5 minutes after meeting her. Emily didn't mind. Kindness had never needed applause. She became the person everyone quietly depended on. The receptionist called in sick. Emily stayed late. A patient's family hadn't eaten all day. Emily found meal vouchers. Someone needed directions for the 10th time. She walked them there herself. She remembered birthdays, children's names, wedding anniversaries. The nurses adored her. The janitors joked that she worked harder than half the administrators. Security officers greeted her every morning. Even doctors who barely knew her smiled because she'd somehow made their impossible days a little easier. Ironically, many of Daniel's colleagues knew Emily before they ever met Daniel, but Daniel preferred to keep those worlds separate. The first time Emily noticed, it happened in the hospital cafeteria. She was carrying 2 coffees she'd bought for Daniel. He was sitting with several senior surgeons. She smiled. "There you are." Daniel looked up. Something flashed across his face. Not happiness, panic. Emily slowed. One of the older surgeons smiled warmly. "You must be Daniel's wife." Emily nodded. Before she could answer, Daniel laughed. "Oh, Emily just works downstairs." The words landed strangely. Not wrong, just incomplete. Emily waited for him to finish. He didn't. She forced a smile. "I brought your coffee." "Thanks." He took it without standing, without introducing her, without asking her to join them. She stood there for another second, then quietly walked away. One of the older surgeons looked after her. "You never said your wife works here." Daniel shrugged. "We try not to mix work and home." The conversation moved on, but something inside Emily stayed behind at that table. It became a pattern. At charity dinners, he wandered off to network. At medical conferences, he introduced her only when someone asked. When hospital executives invited spouses, Daniel suddenly became too busy. It's mostly business anyway. When Emily suggested taking a vacation together, there'll be time later. Later never came.